about logging in or my password because it had been a minute, but
Yeah.
just as good. I didn't know that about the filters on Zoom. Very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people insist. They go, no. They don't have filters on Skype. I want to use Zoom.
Damn. See, I snoozed.
But these filters are a, before we get into these common responses to trauma, let's talk about
Yeah.
filters for a second,
Let's
because
talk about it.
interesting phenomenon. Now, I don't know how many guys use filters, but I
Oh,
know
yeah.
the same thing about filters. It reminds me of online dating photos where people put their best photo possible out there, professional photo. And Jim Rohn said that he always used to put a really bad photo of himself in the back of his book so that anytime
Oh,
someone
wow.
person, they'd be like, wow, you look way better in person.
That's actually genius. Yeah. To be honest with you, I haven't been on a dating app yet. I'm not saying I would never get on one, but I've heard really, really like horror stories about people going on dates on both sides, men and women, like just the person that you portray yourself to be. If there's such a big gap, like I don't understand how anybody expects that to go well when you meet up in person, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but
so very unnatural. I'm always surprised when I meet a couple and that's how they met. It doesn't happen often, but I've met a few couples and that's how they met, and they've been together for a long time. So it definitely works. Or at least it's working right now. But
right.
Many years ago, it always felt very contrived. It always felt, you know what, this is not supposed to happen. I'm never supposed to have met this person because it feels very forced. There isn't anything natural about it. At least that was my experience.
You mean it with dating apps in general?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the modern dating were like, but just internet dating back in, let's say, the late 1990s, early 2000s.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. I think that's probably the reason, like intuitively for me personally, it's never felt right to meet somebody that way. Although I have met people via, social media, it just feels a little different to me. I do know a couple of people, one in particular, one of my best friends, she and her husband met. I mean, they've been together about 20 years now, but I do think it's more an exception than the rule. Although maybe it's changing. Maybe the dating apps have become more sophisticated. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think social media is better because, especially if you're putting out a lot of content like you do and I do, you can get to know someone, or at least certain sides of them. And you can have some interaction so that if it leads to something beyond that, there's something to start with. You already have a friendship. I mean, a lot of people in any relationship, after you've been with someone for a while, the most important thing you realize is compatibility. Everything
100%.
else, those things are important too. You need to have the love, affection, it's respect, desire, and all those things are important. But compatibility becomes the most important thing. So if you're starting off as friends with someone, that's a level of compatibility. That's not a bad thing. We often hear like, "Oh, don't get stuck in the friend zone. You're never going to get out of there." And I mean, you're never going to get out of there if you just make it known, if you don't make it known that you want anything otherwise. But
absolutely,
if you never do make it out of there, that doesn't really matter. That's not important. But you have something in common right off the bat before it leads to anything else. There's something there.
It's so interesting. I couldn't agree more. And it's so interesting. I think it just kind of shows you what our current societal concept of relationship even is, that we don't understand that a friendship must be the basis of any long-lasting relationship, or that it ought to be the basis. Yeah, definitely a degraded
being friends with each other too, because I think sometimes it can happen on both sides. It's more the male to female, where there's an ulterior motive where, okay, let me start off here and then I'll try to work my way in. And then that almost feels like a betrayal too, because you think you're just friends with someone and then 6 months into it, they drop this on you and you go, man, you've been thinking that all this time. You've just been waiting for your moment.
I definitely think that's true. It definitely happens. And it does feel a bit like a betrayal. Although, if we were to go really deep on it and get super honest, really with ourselves as women as well, I think we know. I think we have a sense that, when we're friends with a guy, and it is a platonic thing, right? But you kind of get a sense that somebody is potentially interested in you. And I think, and I know I'm just kind of going to call it out because I have done this myself in the past as well. We like the benefits of the friendship, and we don't really want to admit to ourselves that maybe there's something else going on. And sometimes it's not until you're dating somebody else and then you see their response to it and you're like, whoa, like something's off here, But I think if we're really honest with ourselves, we know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, let's pivot into these traumas here, because you put up content on common responses or the main responses to trauma. And a few of them most of us have heard of, but there's a few that not too many of us are familiar with. But when we hear it, we go, okay, that makes a lot of sense, because I've either done that myself or I've seen other people do it. So let's get into that.
Totally. Yeah. So I feel the two common responses that pretty much everybody knows about, because we use them in our common vernacular or vocabulary, common dialogue, is fight or flight. Like people often talk about, it was, I get into a fight or flight mode, or I can see that somebody else, when they're triggered, they get into this fight or flight mode, which basically means you stay, you get hyper confrontational, or you flee, right? Those are the two that I feel like we don't really need to go too deep into, because they're common knowledge. The third one that I think a lot of people know about, and it's really self-explanatory, is the freeze response. So people fight, flight, or freeze. And freeze is exactly that. It's you basically become, it's like a state of paralysis, because you're in some sort of emotional flashback where you just can't move. This happens with animals in the wild. You see it everywhere. It happens with human beings as well. So, and that's obviously a trauma response, because you are literally unable to move or proceed in the dialogue or in the conflict or in the situation. The fourth response that I feel a lot of people don't know about is the fawning response. So these are basically the 4 Fs, right? Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fawning is really just another word, and it was coined by Pete Walker. I didn't come up with the word or the concept, but it's really another word for people pleasing. So fawning is when you find yourself saying and doing things that are really not in integrity and not true to how you feel, as a way to cope with a situation. So it's where we basically abandon the authentic self and go into people pleasing mode, because we don't know how else to show up for ourselves. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah. A lot of people notice they become really agreeable. They just, and in fact, the way they manage it is it's not so much that they're not expressing how they feel on it. They're just trying to find the part of someone's argument that they agree with and just focus on that. But they're being disliked by bringing up a contrary point, so that they purposely keep that to themselves.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's all of that. And, although, it may be true, or we may tell ourselves a story that, well, this one aspect of what this person's saying, I agree with. You're not saying the whole thing. You're not saying the parts that maybe you don't agree with, or the places where you would like some form of compromise. And this is really common in relationships with people that are either aggressive or abusive, or people that have had abusive relationships in the past, because the price, as it were, of speaking up can be really high. And when we've experienced really unhealthy relationships with genuinely toxic, that word is thrown around a lot these days, but I mean truly toxic, truly personality disorder, truly narcissistic people, you train yourself to believe that it's dangerous to actually have an opinion different from the other person. And or in childhood, it may have actually been dangerous as a child to have an opinion that was different than mom or dad. Like for some people, that meant a lot of pain. That meant punishment. So, but it is in fact a trauma response. And I think the more we can start to bring awareness to the fact that, am I being agreeable? I love that you use that word, as a way of coping with a situation that also includes abandoning my authentic self.
Yeah. Some people that have been through, I went through pretty severe childhood abuse. And when you're going through that when the trauma is happening, you're trying to please the abuser as a survival mechanism, because that's what you think you need to do to survive the situation, whether you know it intuitively or it's just what you feel is right in the moment. But that can create a precedent for now you're constantly doing that. Maybe you seek abusive relationships without realizing, and then you're trying to please the abuser within the context of those relationships. And it all comes back to that unresolved trauma. So that's what I think unresolved childhood trauma is extremely important to address. And that's why I always say that everyone can benefit from therapy, especially the people who don't think they can. Like, I don't need that, I'm fine. And then you're drinking, you have 5 drinks a night and you hate your job. You're constantly distracting yourself.
Yeah.
Instagram all day long for likes from strangers. It's like, yeah, you need to,
Yes.
everybody can benefit from that. But it's getting to those, not everyone's been through severe childhood trauma, but everyone's been through something. They've been through something that's unresolved, something that affects their behavior as an adult. And if you know the connection, at least you can put it together and modify things. But often you don't know the connection. You don't know why you do things you do.
Right. And there's freedom in that. There's freedom. There's liberation in being able to understand why we are the way we are and to really work through it with an unbiased person. And, I just want to comment on one thing you said a minute ago, which is that as the child in the abusive situation, it's not just that the child thinks he or she doesn't have an option. You don't have an option as a child. So that's a really valid way to feel as a child, and you said this as well. Intuitively, on a cellular level, the child knows that these people are their life, they're dependent on them. Your existence is dependent on these two big people where there's a massive power differential. It's not right that it's that way, but it is that way. So a child can't do anything but integrate. And what the child does is tell himself or herself a story that, it's too dangerous to think my parents are bad. It's much safer as a child to think, well, I must be bad.
Right.
Can you imagine as somebody who's basically helpless and powerless to think that the world is an evil place? It's impossible to integrate that as a child. So I always tell people, it's understandable that we've adopted this coping mechanism. It's beyond a coping mechanism. It's a model of reality that says, I'm bad, because it served you at one point in time. It isn't true, and it doesn't actually serve you because it isn't true. But we do have to deconstruct that. And therapy is one of the ways that you can do that. And one other thing I wanted to comment on that you said, it's true that not everyone has experienced childhood abuse. I didn't experience childhood abuse in the way that so many people have. I wouldn't say that I experienced childhood abuse per se at all. But even the experience of feeling emotionally neglected or misunderstood or not attended to can have consequences, because it makes us not trust our take on things. It makes us separate. It's still this way that we create a false persona, a false self. Here, mom and dad, do you like this version of me? Will this work? Can this buy me your love? That's still a problem as you get older and you try to have relationships, and it's not really you showing up, because you don't even know, for a lot of people, they don't even know that it's not themselves showing up. It's just a pattern of things not working out, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point about how we create these versions of ourselves. So if when you're in that people pleasing mode, especially, hey, how about this version? Nope, that one's not good. Okay, how about this version?
Yeah, exactly.
You're constantly being an actor. I mean, a lot of us are basically actors in our own movie. So we're playing the script that's been given to us, or the one that we've created, and we're trying to maneuver through that the best way that we can. Right. But there's always that component of peer pressure. Peer pressure never goes away. That's always
that's true.
As an adult, and sometimes it's not even. It's more subtle. It's not just in your face. It's more you're looking at what your neighbors have and you're thinking, okay, I need to have that, or I wonder what they think of me. And I mean, constantly think about how much of one's day is wasted just constantly thinking about how they're being perceived by
100%. Yeah. It's the substitute though, right? When we don't have a relationship with ourselves, when there is effectively no self there, you have to find that hit, that it's the connection. We're wired for connection as human beings, as mammals, right? So we need connection. And because we don't have it with ourselves, or, a power greater than ourselves, or we don't have that, we're not connected to a spirituality or a meaning or a purpose, we look for it. It's the cheap substitute is to get it from other people, to get validation in the form of likes or in the form of people like you. And that's why when people don't like you or disapprove, it hurts so bad, because if it's the only thing you have and it feels threatened, that's not a good place to be. It's and it is self-created. It's a self-created prison. And I don't say that to judge people. It's like we have to just be willing to honestly look at ourselves and where we are. We have to know what we're working with so that we can move forward. And it's still a movie. It's a movie no matter what. It's all self-created. It's all a movie, but it's like, do you like the movie? Do you like the character you're playing? Right. Like, do we want to upgrade our human and upgrade the role we're playing in this human experience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think in the context of intimate relationships, people come in with what they think are their best version, or at least what the other person's going to find most appealing. But at some point, though, you can't hold the facade forever.
No, you sure can't.
The best professional actor, they're not always in character. At some point, they have to shut it off, and then whatever's close to their real self has to come out at some point. So
Yes.
if you're going in, if you're trying to be something you're not to attract someone, how long are you going to be able to sustain that? Eventually, it's not going to work. And then the other person will be like, "Wow, I didn't realize you were like this." Like, nope, this is what I'm like, and I didn't realize you didn't like what I'm like. And so now we're all
Yeah, and nothing reveals it like intimate relationships. Nothing reveals the parts of ourselves that we do our best to keep hidden. And the intimate relationship, I actually think is one of the greatest opportunities for growth. If you're willing to do it, if somebody's willing to do it with full vulnerability, right? Because it's that mirror. The other person's there as a mirror. If we're willing to see it that way, if we're willing to use the relationship as a place for spiritual growth and practice, then it's a beautiful thing. If we're only willing to see it as a place where people annoy us and we have to move on to the next person, well, then it's not so great, you know?
right. Well, that's how people just keep dating the same person over and over again, or keep marrying the same person over and over again.
Totally.
See these rock stars from the 1980s where they have this one blonde bombshell wife and that doesn't work out, and then the next wife looks exactly like her.
Exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah, they keep chasing the honeymoon phase of each relationship. They're going, man, the first 3 months with her were incredible, and then it went downhill. So now you move on to the next one. It's like, hey, first 3 months are great again, and now you just
right.
think that it's someone new that needs to keep coming in this revolving door.
Exactly. And we also don't see that the issues that come up with the person are really, it's the universe's way of trying to show us, here's where you still have work to do. And
Right.
instead of saying, oh my gosh, thank you, because it's obviously a loop, it's obviously a pattern, we're just like, nope, not my problem. Let me go on to the next thing. And, you know, from a brain perspective, the subconscious mind is basically always seeking familiarity.
Right.
Because it wants to keep us safe. It's the only job it has. And I think this is one of the things, if people take away nothing from this except that, just to understand this fundamental truth that we're primarily driven by the subconscious. This is why getting some form of therapy or coaching is so important. Because if we don't make the unknown known, it keeps driving us and we don't know what's driving us. It's like somebody else is in the driver's seat of our car. And if life feels out of control, life feels like it doesn't make any sense. Whereas if you start to really see, like step back and look at all these different puzzle pieces and say, wow, actually this person is literally triggering me because it's pointing to where it still hurts inside. Okay, I can do something about this. I can actually put the dating on hold and really look inward. And I say this, like I'm the first person to raise my hand and say, you know, even as somebody in the profession, this is an area where I've really had to do some deep inner soul searching and understand that it's the thing that's showing up. It's not some external force that's being imposed upon you. It's you. It's your wounds being reflected to you in the form of another human being. And to your point, that's why the same person keeps showing up. It's like you change the scenery, but not the situation. But it's up to us. We don't have to wake up to it. You know, it's because of free will, because of the law of free will. We can just keep doing this on repeat. You can do it your whole life. You can do it for lifetimes. We have been doing it for lifetimes, right? But at some point, and I would say to anybody listening to this, if any of this is resonating with you, it's probably a sign, like don't ignore the sign that maybe it is time to go a little deeper into your healing. If this is making sense to you, it's not going to make sense to everybody. Some people are going to be like, whatever, that's stupid. And that's fine too. But for people where it's actually resonating, there's a reason. Like that's your intuition talking to you and saying, let's go to the next step, right?
Right. That takes a lot of introspection. And I think it's easy to have the illusion of making positive changes in your life that are seemingly superficial. One is just moving somewhere new. Now, I'm not against moving somewhere new. I think that's a good thing. I'm from back east. I moved to Los Angeles in 2002 with my career, and things blew up. I needed to get out of where I think everyone should get out of wherever they grew up. You know, just personal growth. Maybe you go back at some point if you feel like it, but you need to get out of there for a while. At least that's the way I look at it. But sometimes people are constantly moving because they think I just need to change the scenery. You know, things aren't working out for me in LA. Let me move to Vegas. Like, Vegas is not working out. Let me move to Austin. Maybe I need to get overseas. You know, maybe it's America.
Are you telling my story right now? Yeah, no, that's exactly right. 100%.
People move to Costa Rica. Those crazy people, they're just running away from their problems.
Yeah, there you have it. You have it.
but sometimes
Food
I
for
think
thought.
it can be a really good thing, but you're taking yourself with you wherever you go. So
Yep.
whatever problems you have, most likely they're independent of the place you're at. And if they are, which is in most cases the case, you're taking those with you wherever you go.
Yes.
Now you're in a
You
new
will take them
state.
with you.
Initially, you'll be distracted by that. Like, hey, this is great. I like the lifestyle out here. Then a little bit later, going, huh, I still feel that. It's like, oh, I still have to deal with that. Why do I feel this way?
Right. And it's also a beautiful thing that it's that way, because it's an invitation to heal. It's an invitation to go deeper, because if you believe that that's why we're here, if we subscribe to this idea that we are here to grow and to evolve and expand in consciousness, like what else, what are we doing here otherwise?
Right.
So then it starts making sense. It's like, oh, this isn't an accident. This is all divinely orchestrated, and there's nothing wrong, you know? And you and I were talking about this a minute before we got on this chat. And this is, I think, part of the problem with comparing ourselves to other, not even to other people, but to what other people decide they want to show you on social media.
Right. Right.
It's so incomplete. It's like, talk about not having all the pieces to the puzzle, right? And so there's nothing wrong per se in anybody's life. It's just the willingness to turn inward and really commit to doing the work and valuing and honoring our process and our journey enough to pause and to stop with the externalizing and stop with the blaming. And in some ways, our society encourages it. I have to say, I think in some ways our society encourages a victim consciousness, but I don't think it serves people.
No, it definitely doesn't. And with social media, a lot of times what we're seeing are just people's greatest hits. And here they're happy. Because not to me, I've never seen a couple that's got into a fight throwing dishes at each other post a video clip of that. Now, I'd like to see that. I think someone should do that. Yeah, that would be highly. But no, people don't do that though. They put on their most, like, here's the perfect, here's as close to my life being perfect as I can get, that I want to project out there.
Right. And it gives people a false idea and a false expectation. And then the other thing is, with people that haven't reached or arrived at a certain level of success, that success didn't happen overnight for most people, for most of us. You don't see, right. Somebody, a friend posted something recently. It's like, don't compare your chapter 5 to somebody else's chapter 20. And it's so true. It's not, it's like, we have to fall out of this trap of, but fundamentally, I was going to say, out of this trap of being entitled to something, and also feeling like where we are isn't right. There's nothing about that thought that serves you. And I really encourage people to ask themselves better questions, because the quality of our life is really dependent on the quality of questions we ask. So say, how is this experience here to teach me? What can I learn? How is this experience inviting me to grow? Even when it's painful, especially when it's painful. These are way better questions than, why is this happening to me? Because the computer is basically the brain is basically a computer. So it will generate whatever you put in, it's going to have to give you something back. So if you ask, excuse the language, but if you ask shitty questions, you're going to get really shitty answers. So if somebody asks, for example, like, why can't I lose this extra weight? Well, your brain's going to give you some answer that's not going to serve you, because the question is predicated on you being a victim. Right. As opposed to, okay, how can I upgrade my health? What else can I do? What else can I restrict? What foods can I stop eating? What behavior can I stop engaging in to help me get to this next level of health? That's a way better question, because it puts you in a place of empowerment. And you can do this for every area of your life. And it's one of the things I do, like, deeply with my clients. It's just, we have to start asking ourselves better questions if we want a better life. Yeah.
Definitely. I think one of the payoffs with focusing on being a victim is you get attention. It may be the only time. So it can be a source of energy. You talk about your problems and people go, oh, I feel terrible for you. Is there anything I can do for you? You're like, okay, this is different. People actually care about you right now.
Yeah.
So on some level, you may not want to get rid of whatever the issue is, because you're getting attention from others for that. You're getting a positive feedback.
100%. That's true. And, it's not that, people go through things. It's not that we shouldn't be there and have compassion for people, or that people shouldn't have compassion for themselves. That's real. But, you have to really sit up and take notice. Is this a perpetual problem in my life? Have I been here for the last year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? It is like, are you willing to sit up and say, this is a bit of, I don't know, a pattern, like, I'm just chronically unhappy or chronically unhealthy or chronically broke, whatever the case may be. That attention, that hit of dopamine we get from other people, eventually it wears out, because people get tired. then you have to find new people. Well, that's a lot of energy output. People think they don't have the energy to like do the inner work. It's like, you really don't have the energy. You can't really afford not to.
Yeah. Yeah. You really don't have the energy not to do the inner work, because you're just
Exactly.
not going to have energy. You're not going to have any energy for anything after a while.
Exactly.
That, because it's just zapping you at all times. Those
Right.
things unresolved. I mean, they're just dissipators of energy constantly. You're just losing energy all day.
Absolutely. It's a leak. It's like a leak in the system, and you have to figure out where the leak is and address it. And that can only happen internally. There's no external solution to the leak.
Yeah. I think we get a lot of bad advice, at least my generation growing up. No one ever asked you, what are you excited about? What makes you happy? What kind of career would you be excited about? It's more, pledge, get a job. But that was the full extent of the advice. Go to
Right.
a job, and then you'll have vacations and weekends and all of that, rather than what actually excites you. Because when I went to college, the only thing that excited me was religious studies, and that ended up being what I majored in. Now, the advice I got from others is, what are you going to do with that? You're not going to get a job with that. Now, what they fail to tell you is that you're not really going to get a job with any degree.
Right.
You don't have any experience.
Right.
Right. So you can major in business administration and get straight A's. Company's going to go, look, you don't have any work experience, so you're going to get coffee for us for the next year or two. So you might as well major in something that actually excites you. If no major is necessarily going to get you a job versus one or the other, unless you're in some prestigious university, even then it's not as simple as that. But especially I went to a liberal arts college in Worcester, Ohio. No one's even heard of the college I went to. For all they know, it could be a fake college on a resume. There's no point in me suffering through 4 years studying something that has no interest, that I have no interest in. But I learned a really valuable lesson. I wasn't a good student until I got into religious studies. And then I got into Sufism and Buddhism, and that really resonated with me. And all of a sudden I became a really good student, not because I cared about getting straight A's or Dean's List or any of that stuff. It was just a side effect of being interested in the material. And I was so interested in the material, I would do additional reading just for myself, not for some extra.
Wow.
So that's when you know you're following your bliss. Now, I learned a very valuable lesson at that early stage of my life, that I'm only going to be good at what I enjoy doing. I'm only going to be happy doing what I enjoy doing. Once you get out of college, though, reality sets in, you start doing a bunch of jobs you don't want to do. Eventually, though, you always lead back to your true self, where I kept getting spat out of that corporate world, working for others. So I knew, in fact, the best advice I got was a guy who didn't have good intentions. That's why I made that post about intentions the other day. It's like, don't get over on intentions, because sometimes people have really good intentions, but they're giving you bad advice. But because you're so focused on the fact that their intentions are good, you're not receptive to that bad advice. And sometimes people who don't have your best intentions are giving you great advice, but because you don't like the person, you're going, I'm not going to follow that advice.
You dismiss it. Yeah.
Last boss I ever had, and he was a terrible guy, but he told me, he goes, look, this working for other people is not for you. You're a natural entrepreneur. And I knew that already, but hearing him say that just resonated even more. I go, you know what? You're absolutely right. I don't want to work for a guy like you ever again.
There you go.
End of it, you just burn my bridge. I go, I'm fine. I want to do something I'm going to enjoy doing, which is the fitness industry. It's always been a hobby of mine. And I'm going to infuse that spirituality I got from my religious studies. Yeah. That's why I have a very philosophical component of what I do. I go into totally different domains. But the most important thing is that I'm good at what I do because I enjoy doing it. If I don't enjoy it, I'm not going to put in all the research that it takes to be really knowledgeable about something.
Yes.
Trial and error and personal experience. You're not going to go through all that if it doesn't mean anything to you.
So true. It's the passion is the fuel. And honestly, if there's no passion, there's really no point. I say that to people all the time as well. I couldn't agree more. It's not sustainable. Whereas when you are passionate, you would be doing this anyway. You know, I was doing what I was doing before I ever made any, decent money actually doing it, because I couldn't not do it. It was in my nature to do the work that I do and to be analytical. And I've always been that way. Again, like you said, looking back, all the signs were there, but like so many people, I ignored them. And I was like, okay, I'm going to major in this. Well, my dad wants me to major in this, so I'll do that. Because, really good intentions, but, not right for me. And that's the other thing, I think from a big picture perspective, we are sold a massive lie when it comes to higher education. And it's unfortunate because it's not for everybody. And I don't even know that it's for most people, especially the way it is now. And then to your point about that, when you started doing better in school is because it was something you were interested in. It breaks my heart honestly, few things break my heart as much as seeing children unhappy. You know, I think children and animals are the two things, right, that just really get me.
Right.
And seeing children diagnosed with all kinds of nonsense, seeing children that are supposedly have ADHD, whereas the real underlying issue, well, for some kids, is that they're actually sad, and sadness manifests as attention problems in children. Depression doesn't look the way in a 5-year-old that it does in an adult.
Right.
And then the other thing is some of these kids are just, they're bored out of their minds. And can you blame them? In schools with, you know, just so lackluster, the teachers don't want to be there a lot of the time. And it's not to knock the teachers. The teachers are also subjected to the system and the rules and the parameters and the boundaries and the, you know, some of them, I think for the most part, the intention is good.
Yeah.
To your point, when they start out, but the passion is lost at some point along the way. But we have to take responsibility for the life that we are creating for ourselves, because that radiates out to every single person we touch. So when we're not happy, I would go so far as to say, when we're not happy and when we're not in our purpose, we're actually also taking something from other people, right? We're stealing from the collective because of what we could and would otherwise be giving were we fully tapped into our passion, our purpose, our gift. And that's part of the work, because you can't go on this healing journey and not at some point get to the place where you're like, okay, what do I actually want to be doing with my life? Like, what brings me joy? What brings me happiness? It's part of the unfolding.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how one can have one without the other. If I don't enjoy what I do for a living, I'm just not going to be happy. I'm prone to depression as it is, but the more I'm focused on things that I enjoy doing and that I feel bring value to other people and help other organizations, the better I feel. So if I'm doing a job I hate, there's no way I'm going to feel good. There's just
that's true.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just, I think that's true for a lot of people if they're honest with themselves. But what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, I think some people have a very low set point for happiness, right? Other people need to achieve things and then they feel really good. I'm in that latter category. So some people are, you know, I may look at their life and go, man, they must be miserable, but they love their life. They're perfectly okay with it, whatever it is, whether it's working at the post office. Nothing wrong with working at the post office, but it just looks like a very boring job, which is why I bring it up. But if someone's happy doing that, who am I to say, hey, you couldn't possibly be happy doing this? If they're genuinely happy doing it, because it's their life. I'm not living their life for them. They're living it. So as long as they're happy doing that. Now, other people, they need to have, whether it's more adventure or greater impact or more intensity to it, you just have to have more of those steps. You have to be higher up the ladder to feel really good, to feel at your best. And I don't think one is necessarily better than the other, but when you know your ladder, you better pursue that path. You better be like, okay, if this is what I need to do to be happy, then I better do it, because I'm going to be miserable otherwise. So sometimes we get distracted by other people. And some of the other bad advice is like, look, what are you complaining about? You know, there's people in Africa that would love to be in your situation. And I go, you know what? That doesn't help me, you telling me that, and it doesn't help them either, right? It's not, look, whether I pursue what I want to do or not, it's not going to really have an impact on them unless I donate some funds over there. So don't put me in the situation where I should feel guilty now, because I'm being honest about things I'm dissatisfied about, because that's the first step. Meaningful change. You have to be dissatisfied.
This is just a great example, though, of how our environment can either hold us back or lift us up. And the truth is that most people, especially if you are still in an environment that you've been in for a long time or still hanging around with people that you've known for a long time and you're leveling up your life, chances are your environment is going to change. Your circle of friends is going to change, because this is a mindset issue. Definitely. Right? No billionaire, right? And I'm just using that because it's one of the measures and markers of people who've done some things, right, in life. Right. Is ever going to, for example, tell you that your idea, that you shouldn't pursue a certain idea. If you go to any billionaire on this planet and are like, hey, I've got this idea, it may not even be a good idea. But if you tell it to somebody who's achieved a certain level of success, they're going to cheer you on. It's just in their nature, because they've expanded so much. You go tell that idea to mom, dad, potentially a sibling or somebody from high school, you're not going to get that support. They're going to tell you things more along the lines of, what are you complaining about? You should be happy, be more great. And, you can be grateful and still want more, by the way. That's actually totally possible as well. But it's, I don't think people do it intentionally. It's just an unconscious way of holding other people back, really to make themselves feel better. Nobody that's playing a bigger game than you is ever going to tell you you should just be happy with where you are. It's only people playing a smaller game, obviously, right? Yeah. And not always. There's people that are very aware that they're not playing that big of a game, but they're still going to cheer you on because it's just their nature. It's who they are. But when people knock you or tell you things that are, yes, I agree with you, are super unhelpful, you just have to step back and say, does this person actually have anything I want? And if not, like, please stop taking advice from them. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. If someone's giving me advice, I want to see, is this person actually happy with his or her life? Is this person miserable? Some people are just miserable all the time. And that doesn't mean that they can't give you good advice. But when it comes to certain life advice, most likely whatever they're conveying is probably not something you should receive.
Well, advice is also easy, right? We get advice from memes and from books all the time, but it's like somebody to actually hold the energy and the vibration of that reality. You can't hold it unless you've lived it and experienced it and created the thing. It could be in any area of life. Somebody may not have achieved massive financial success, but they have, they're operating at a very high level of health, and they know a lot about, let's say, detox. It could be different for, different areas of life. I hear people say sometimes that, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And, I think there's some truth to that, but I've also seen people who have really done well in some areas of their life, but not all areas of their life. Like, they're still working on some other things, but I think it's that lived experience that's so valuable. So if I want better health, I'm going to go to somebody that has it. I'm not going to go to somebody who's just read books about it. That just doesn't resonate for me,
Right. Yeah. That's why a lot of people like trainers who used to be out of shape or used to be overweight, because that's more a trainer who was maybe 80 pounds overweight at some point in his or her life, and they lost that weight doing things that they're going to teach you. That's more relatable to an average person than someone who has always been an athlete throughout their entire life. They were an athlete in high school, elementary school, you name it. So they've never been overweight. They don't understand that struggle on a personal level. Doesn't mean that they can't give you advice that's useful, but that level of empathy is not necessarily going to be there.
I agree, because it hasn't been a lived experience, and it's not that way for everything. But I do think for a lot of things, we connect more deeply with people when we see their vulnerability. And so somebody who's had to overcome that kind of a weight challenge or go from actually being unhealthy to healthy, it's like you see their humanness, and that's what connects us, because we connect through emotion. Ideas, connect us to some degree, but it's really through emotion and caring about the same things and having a similar emotional resonance that we connect with people.
Yeah, the vulnerability one is a big deal. And especially with men, there's not a lot of vulnerability, especially men with other men, because men often feel like they have to put on this construct of, hey, I've got it together. I'm on top of things. My life is set. And so you're always trying to project that strength. And look, if you're going through a hard time, why is that it doesn't diminish you in any way to want to talk about that or need to talk about it. We all need that.
I think it's completely the opposite. And not only doesn't diminish you, it takes so much strength. And a man that's willing to do that gives other men permission to do the same. I think men are just, this is kind of a bit off topic, but I do feel like men are just under attack in so many ways, and have really been forced into a situation where they kind of don't know how they're allowed to be. It's like, you don't want to be too soft or too emotional. And on the other hand, it's like, well, you don't want to be quote unquote toxic. It's like this whole toxic masculinity thing going on. It's like, well, what's the request here? Like, what do we want from these people, that are, by the way, I know there's this whole transgender thing going on, so I don't really want to get into that, but I was going to say, and then I caught myself in this modern day area that we're living in. I was going to say, it's really just us here. It's men and women and children and animals and this beautiful earth. But we have to figure out a way to understand that if men are losing, we're losing as a society. It's not separate. Men are not separate from this experience that we're having. So maybe we could do a whole other podcast on that sometime. I don't know how deep you want to go into that, but I do feel, and I work with a lot of men, and I work with men, one of the things I do is I work with professional athletes, and it is heartbreaking to see how many of them are suffering in silence. And especially, these guys who people think kind of just have it all. And again, they should be happy, right? They're making millions of dollars. Like, what's the problem? It's the sense of, we dehumanize people, to thinking that money or millions of dollars makes you happy. And it doesn't necessarily make you happy. And even if you're relatively happy, it doesn't mean you're immune to life stressors and problems, and that you shouldn't be allowed to talk about them like any human being should be allowed to do.
Right. That's the other thing too. If you have a certain level of material success, it's like, hey, we don't want to hear about your problems. So now you don't have a right to bring it up. People think that if you achieve a certain things in the material world, that you're just going to be categorically happy at all times.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons it's so important to just learn to press the mute button on the world, because for the most part, people, especially the loudest people, often they're the least kind because they're the most in need of healing.
Right.
And this is massively a thing online, right? And it's impossible not to read certain comments and be like, well, I'm just not affected. You're human. You're going to be infected. Things infiltrate. That's just our nature. We're designed that way on purpose. It's not unhealthy that we're that way. But the alternative isn't to just be numb and go numb and just get into this place of, oh, nothing affects me. That's actually, that's concerning to me. What's a better response, I think, is to learn to mute things out and to not engage and to not look and to just understand that hurt people, right? But when you get to
people that are trolling, I go, these are people dealing with pain. Now, I used to find, I still find trolls irritating. Everyone does. But when I see someone that's engaging in trolling behavior, I go, this is a hurt individual that is just desperate for attention. Any response they get is going to be a win. So if they go on some celebrity's Twitter and they say something stupid and Ice-T responds back like, hey, F you, man, they're going to be like, man, Ice-T took time
Ice-T respond. Yeah.
So positive or negative, it's a win for them. Now they feel important. But the larger,
so
they're very, look, when you decide to create a fake moniker and spend your free time just trolling people randomly, that's not coming from a happy place. It's not because you're really happy with the way your life has unfolded.
No, it's not. And, I think, eventually we can get to a place where the triggers are diluted enough that we don't feel the need to respond. Because that's also, again, pointing to where there's some need for healing within us. If our reaction is to go ballistic on somebody, well, it's like, wow, it's like, okay, where is that person showing you where there's maybe some healing that you still get to do? But besides that, I think this is about keeping your space sacred. It's about like really cleaning house. And that might mean, turning off comments or just not being on social media. Or if you're on it, you got to find, hire an assistant if you can. This is obviously for people that are operating at that level. But even in just your day-to-day life, like social media and athletes and influencers and really big celebrity types aside, for any of us, right? In our day-to-day life, what are we allowing into our environment? What are we tolerating in our day-to-day life that we know that if we let it go, it would open up space for abundance? Right. So most people are talking to people, engaging in habits, engaging in relationships that they know full well don't serve them, and they know full well are holding them back. So the question would be, what do I get to stop doing that would make space in my life for something new to actually occur? Because we can't receive anything new if our life doesn't have space for it. But most people, because we're operating from a fear mindset, a scarcity mindset, we're like, I'm just going to hang on to all the things. We do this in relationship a lot, right? And then when the new thing comes around, when the better thing comes around, I'll just grab that. Well, you're operating from a place of scarcity and fear. The new thing, it's not going to be new. It's going to look new, but it's going to be old because you're still vibrating at the same place. You haven't actually learned the lesson.
Yeah, that's super powerful, especially in the context of your most intimate relationships. You just keep bringing in whatever problems you have to the next person, and now you're getting the same or similar problems that just keep perpetuating themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all an invitation to go deeper. There's no sense in sitting there and beating ourselves up over it. It's just like, wow, can I learn this massive lesson of actual self-love, and then understand that because I haven't had that love for myself, I haven't truly had love for others. It's really most of the time an ego attachment. And even that, can I return to a place of self-compassion and self-love? We can't do better until we know better. And a lot of our problems really don't require a solution per se. They require an expanded perspective. They require a new level of consciousness. And when we can tap into that, we can really start to make some progress and pick up some momentum in life if we're willing to do that.
Compassion is, to me, is the most important or the most powerful form of strength. So not just compassion to others, to all beings, but also compassion to yourself. So if you lead from that place of being compassionate, that's often going to guide you down the right roads, as long as you're being genuine about what that means. So just letting people run all over you and abuse you, that's not being compassionate to yourself. Abusing others and hurting animals, that's not being compassionate to them. So if you're kind to one person but you're cruel to another, then your compassion is too selective. It has to be much broader than that to be impactful.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, since we're talking a bit about the masculinity, I was talking about this with someone earlier this morning. I think women tend to have a bit of a more open heart. And I think there's a reason why it's mostly women on this planet right now that are vegan or have gone plant-based. But it's actually really interesting because from the archetype perspective of what it means to be a man, it's to be a protector.
Right.
And so to be a man and be harming the most innocent beings on this planet is crazy. And I think that it's crazy in the true sense of the word. It's disconnected. It's separate from reality. It's separate from the truth, right? Beings that experience, pain and joy and love and attachment to their offspring and all these things. And I say that not to, I know people will say like, oh, these vegans are so judgmental. It's not about being judgmental. It's about a willingness to have an honest conversation and actually seeing people as emotionally capable of hearing the truth. I didn't make up the truth. I didn't make up the laws of the universe. These are just the laws. But when you understand them, when you understand the rules of the game, it's a lot more fun. And so to go back to your point about the compassion, is it really compassion? If our heart is closed to the suffering of animals, is it really open to the suffering of humans? Is it really open, or is it just a program we're running? Right. Yeah. And the thing, just one more comment, because this is something that's so near and dear to my heart. Most people think that they're operating from a place of their own beliefs. It's like, this is my choice, my belief, which first of all, where your body ends and another living being's body begins, that's not choice, right? You've actually invaded somebody else's right to choice and to freedom. But beyond that, I really want to encourage people to think about this from the perspective of, what is this belief? Like, who put this belief in our head? This is not us. It's not our belief. It's indoctrination of the most powerful kind, because they have us so programmed and eating things that are literally causing our suffering, that are increasing our cortisol levels because of what the animals go through.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're eating suffering and you want to be happy. It defies all laws of nature.
Yeah.
Right. So,
I would say if someone had to go to a factory farm every single time they wanted to get meat, right? You have to go in there and get the tour. You have to walk through it. And then you have to say, oh yeah, that pig right there, that's the one I want. And then you watch that pig die in that really cruel, there's no real humane way the factory farming is definitely not humane, even to any extent whatsoever. Now, if you had to experience that every single time, I think a lot of people who eat meat and don't think about it, they would start having a problem with it. I think some people wouldn't care. Some people would be like, I don't care. That's what the way it has to be. But I don't think most people would fall into that category.
It's the exception, I think. I think that's true. I think there are some rare individuals who just are so disconnected that wouldn't affect them. But I know for most people I know that still consume animal flesh or fluids or eggs, they can't really even watch the footage, most of them, and yet they're paying for it to be done. This is profound disconnect, though. This is where I don't look at the individual and say, yes, you are participating, but you have to step back and look at when something is so powerful and so insidious, where people are like, I know this is wrong, yet I'm still doing it. That's addiction. Right. That is the definition of addiction. I'm doing this thing. I know it's wrong. I know it's harming me. I know it's harming others. I can't seem to stop. Well, then we have a different conversation we get to have then, once we're willing to accept that something's driving this behavior that isn't of the logical mind, and it's certainly not of the heart. Right. Okay, well then what is it? Well, something really interesting is going on, right? And I think once we're able to understand that this consumption of these things we call animal products is literally designed to be physically addictive. It is designed that way. There are stress hormones that people consume when they consume meat and cheese, and they are designed to keep you hooked, because these are billion-dollar industries, and these people that profit off the suffering. It's completely satanic what we do to animals. Like, that's just a fact, right? Yep. And the fact that they are, these powers that be, the powers that never should have been, don't care about us, our health, our well-being. It's not their job. It's our job to wake up. It's not their job. It's like asking, like most employers or bosses are never going to come tap you on the shoulder and say, you know what, I think you need a vacation, or you're doing too much, do less. This is not the way our society is designed. It's us. We're the ones in control. We have to stop consenting to this. And we have to realize, like, you know what, I am programmed, and everybody's been programmed. Like, I wasn't born. Most of us weren't born vegan or raised vegan. Like, I certainly wasn't. And it's painful. It's painful to take our blinders off. It's painful to realize that we've been participating in a system of violence. It doesn't feel good, you know? So have compassion for yourself, but stop making the excuse that the habits or the custom or the tradition, oh, but my family's from this country, or this is just what we eat. That's a lie. And you can live a lie if you want to, but then you have to suffer the consequences of living a lie, right? So, we get to choose our actions because we have free will. That's one of the things God has given us as human beings is free will, but the consequences are the consequences. You don't get to decide what the consequences of your choices are. And the laws are the laws. So you will suffer when you inflict suffering. And this is the last thing I'll say, because I know I can really rant when it comes to the subject. When you inflict suffering on others, you suffer.
Right.
That's the law.
Yeah. How can you not? How can you support something that's so cruel and it's not going to have some impact on you? You're just going to be disconnected from it. There's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way you can be disconnected from that. And the thing about factory farms also is they go, why is it illegal to film what goes on in there? It's considered an act of terror, right?
It is now. Yeah.
A tour of a wine vineyard. Yeah, sure. We'll take you on a tour. You want to go to see where a bunch of oranges are being grown and apples? Yeah, sure. We'll give you a tour of that. But when it comes to factory, they don't want you to see what's going on in there for a very good reason, because they know a lot of people, even people that love eating meat, would be highly disturbed. It's one 100%. Thing the footage is disturbing enough. Now imagine actually being there on site, hearing the screams, the smells, all of that. That's gonna give people nightmares for a long, long time. And you're gonna have to really, it's gonna recalibrate your thinking, and you're really gonna have to think honestly about your decisions now. And I think that's what they don't want people to experience.
Well, they don't want people to be in truth. They don't want people to live according to the actual laws of the universe. They know, that's why there is some level of consent taken from us, right? This information is now out there. So basically, as far as by they, I mean literally the people that profit off your misery and health and, ill health, that profit off of all these ridiculous sick systems that we've consented to because we haven't really known better. And this is part of what is happening right now. Should we choose to go along with it, it is an awakening process taking place. I fully believe that we will eventually all be on board with this, not because every single person on the planet will understand like, oh, wow, this is really sick and satanic what we do, but because enough people will be saying no, that it simply won't be profitable and sustainable anymore because they only speak a language of money.
That's
but
right.
The people that speak a language of money, they know these laws. They just keep them from us so that we can't reach a certain level of happiness and peace. And let's face it, like the real abundance is about having peace in your heart. Most people have no peace in their heart. But if you're eating suffering, if you're eating, the energetic imprint of a cow is 99% fear. If you're eating fear and stress and suffering and horror and terror, you are not going to have peace in your heart. And on top of that, obviously there's all the actual health issues, but from the energetic standpoint, it's literally karma. It's the law of karma. It always comes back. Everything we send out into the universe comes back. Every thought, every action, and certainly every deed, right? Everything that we participate in, especially once we know, like anyone hearing this, now you don't have that excuse anymore. Anyone that's ever seen a piece of footage, every time we get an additional piece of data and we choose to stay in denial and we choose to stay blind and say, I don't care, I'm just going to ignore that. I'm going to look over here. I'm not going to listen to the cries. I'm not going to tap into my heart and ask myself, does this feel right? Does this feel good? Would I want to be that animal? Would I want to be that child being screamed at? Is this right? Like we've gotten so disillusioned, I think, that this conversation about what's right and wrong, we're in this like subjective moral reality where we can't even talk about that there is such a thing as right and wrong.
Right.
It does actually exist. And this is all part of the really deep insidious program running to keep people so distracted and so confused so that you never actually realize that your life gets to be really good. But it gets to be good if you're willing to play by the actual rules, not the rules that they want you to have.
Yeah. And just lost my train of thought there. I was going to say one more thing about
factory. Sorry, I kind of went off there. Yeah.
What was I going to say about that? I actually had one more point to say about that.
It'll come back. Yeah, it always does. It always comes back. But, and if it does, just interrupt me this time, please. But to your point about the screams, I had already been vegan for years before I first was at slaughterhouse and heard the screams with my own ears. It literally cellularly changed me. It changes you. You're never going to be that same person that you were before. But, the beautiful thing is that we can correct our ways. Again, through free will, we can stop choosing the things that we know that to our heart are wrong. Your heart knows, your spirit knows. It's only the mind that tries to come up with reasons and excuses and justifications. If you just silence the mind, in your heart that it's not right. Yeah.
No, and when you're exposed to the realities of factory farming and you still choose not to change your behavior in any way, you have to ask yourself, what other destructive behaviors are you engaging in that you're turning a blind eye to? Because if even one is not giving you pause, where you're going, hey, ask yourself these questions, I need to make some changes, I don't want to support this anymore. You watch that and you're okay with it. What does that say about you?
Yeah. I think from a really higher lens, I think it's just about the levels of evolution of any one of our souls. I imagine that I was here in previous lifetimes and may very well have not been able to make the connection. I don't know exactly like how many lifetimes I was vegan or how many lifetimes I wasn't, but this is part of the process of evolution. It is through emotion. It is through consciousness that we evolve. And see, so many of the gifts that people are kind of desperately looking for are on the other side of the willingness to make these changes. People are like, well, show me the improved health and then I'll do. It's like asking a plant to grow and saying, then I'll water you. Right. It doesn't work that way. You have to make the changes first and trust in this process. And don't do it because you're trying to get something on the other side. Do it because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
Do it because it feels aligned to your spirit. And the gifts will come. There are so many gifts. I always tell people, like, vegan is a moral baseline. It's not the final frontier. It's actually the beginning of a really expansive life. Like, so many things open up to you when you have that clarity in your body, because you're not eating death and you're not eating suffering. This vessel is like the car, right, that we're driving through life. And we have a very muddy windshield. There's a lot of mud. There's a lot of muck, but we don't know it. We think that this is as much visibility as is available to us. And when you realize that it's not, and you're like, oh my gosh, this thing, I can clean it. This is amazing. And then you can go fast because you want to go fast, but you can't go fast because you have no visibility, because there's so much toxicity in our body and in our minds and in our relationships. Once we clear them, life gets a lot more exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started off with compassion towards animals. I've always had an affinity towards animals, even as a young man, but that actually led to more compassion to people over time as well. I support a lot of different animal rights organizations and animal welfare organizations, but I also support organizations that help kids and human trafficking.
Yeah.
And I think that compassion is all encompassing. It's not something where, well, I don't like to see dogs suffer. Oh, but kids suffering, that's okay. No, it doesn't work that way. Suffering is suffering. I agree. So sometimes, though, you start because you have an affinity in one direction. You go, okay, I love dogs. I'm seeing dogs suffer. Let me focus on that. But that's always going to permeate to other areas. It's going to make you more receptive to other messages. So when you see suffering in another area, you go, okay, I want to do something about that too.
Yeah. If you keep expanding, if you really are on a path of true growth and evolution, it can't not bleed into other areas. I see your posts and I see the things, the causes that you speak for and contribute to financially as well. It's this illusion of separation. Of course, your compassion will eventually extend to all life and to the planet as well, because you realize that you can build your house as high as you want with gates as high as you want. There's no separation. Right. Ultimately what happens to others is happening to you on some level as well, even if it's just karmically. But when you expand your heart of compassion, yes, your heart will ache for the other person's child as if it's your own. And for an animal too, it's all the same, because it's all rooted in the same place. The fact that somebody could look at a dog and have compassion and then eat a pig or a chicken is just shows you how indoctrinated we are. Right. It's just a belief. It's a false belief. It's like it's like a computer with a virus on it, but it's just spinning, and it's just that need to justify. It's not even yours. It's the beliefs have literally, because if you ask yourself, well, when did I start believing that? When did I start believing it was okay to eat a chicken? Well, probably before you had formal thought, because it was probably being fed to you. So we defend our old ways and we defend the customs and the habits. People, there's female genital mutilation in parts of the world, and people say, well, that's just their custom. It's their habit. Well, it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right just because it's a custom.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
Actually acceptable in some countries.
Exactly.
What we're supposed to say is like, no, we would never do that to young kids here, but it's okay. It's okay if they do.
Yeah, it's your culture. Yeah. hiding beneath culture, as if culture isn't meant to change, as if we're not
Right.
meant to evolve past the horrific ways of doing things. We have evolved in many ways as a humanity. I think one of the reasons to step up our game is because technology has also evolved, and it's made it possible for these horrific things to happen at scale now. And
Right.
so we have to really up our game so that we can have enough momentum to really get in front of these things and actually shift the trajectory for the better. And I think it's possible. That's why we have conversations like this. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing about it, animal agriculture also, is that it's heavily subsidized. So one of the other big insidious problems is that even if more people are not eating meat and there's less demand, because they're heavily subsidized, they'll just keep killing animals, even if what their meat never makes it to the marketplace, because they're getting paid to do that.
Yeah.
So we have systemic problems in our system at a deep level that have to be addressed. In fact, when that whole dog meat ban came out, actually dog meat was never officially illegal in America until recently. And then a bill.
I've heard that.
Yeah. Trump signed off on a bill that went through Congress, but there was actually pushback on that bill from the Republican side of things, because they felt that this was a dangerous precedent, meaning that if we say it's not okay to eat dog meat, then we have to start asking ourselves, is it okay to eat? That was
yeah.
But it makes me think of, look, when people see footage of dogs being killed for meat, most people, even most meat eaters, find that horrific. They go, that's terrible, thinking about their dog being in that situation. So there's a personal connection. But what's interesting is that now, once they go down that rabbit hole, now they have to start asking themselves the larger questions. They're like, well, wait a minute, I think this is wrong. But at the same time, I'm buying pigs from factory farming where they're going through just as bad suffering, if not worse. So how do I deal with this juxtaposition of this is wrong over here, but I'm okay with it over here? And you start having that inner dialogue. And for some people, they resolve that conflict by deciding, okay, I don't want to support any of this anymore. So I think it's I think dogs and cats are a good gateway animals into people caring about more animals, because if it starts there, it shows hope. And when I see someone who really loves their animal, their dog, their cat, their rabbit, whatever it is they have at home, there's hope that person will expand that compassion.
1,000%.
Yeah.
That's what happened for us and for my sister and I. And definitely because we didn't have dogs or any animals growing up. So I didn't actually have a connection like that to animals. I actually, to be really honest, I kind of thought it was weird the way people were with their animals, and go figure, given who I am now and how I am and the things I speak about. But it was actually after we got the dogs that we kind of started having a really question, like you said, that inner dialogue started showing up, where it's like, I have that personal connection now to an animal. What's really the difference here? What is actually the difference between this animal, this dog that I love, that I would die for, and a pig or a chicken? And then, you start, I think visiting sanctuaries is another great way to get that connection. You don't have to necessarily acquire an animal. And I know not everybody can bring an animal into their home. Right. Take a visit, go visit a sanctuary, spend 30 minutes there, just make that connection with the animals and look into their eyes. It will totally change you, but I think, like with most things, we have to be willing to revisit the issue. Somebody will say, I felt the connection and I went and I made the connection, I felt it, and then it kind of went away. Well, we've spent so much time with developing the neural pathways of disconnection, of telling ourselves that it is okay to eat this animal, that it might take a minute for you to really, I know some people, it happens really fast. It happened really fast for me. Like once I was exposed to the underground footage, it was just a done deal. And then the same happened with dairy. Once I understood what happened there, it was literally overnight. I know it's not that way for everybody. And I just want to tell people that it doesn't mean you don't have the capacity for your heart to grow into that. I think one of the worst things that happens is when we tell people, and I don't want people to use it as an excuse either, but when we tell people, like, either you get it right away or you're a lost cause. Honestly, we've been so programmed and conditioned to be numb that it's not going to be overnight for some people. It is going to be a process of cleansing that toxicity out of your system, doing fast, going on juice, whatever it is you have to do to get away from the stuff that's actually clouding, that's the gunk on the windshield. And what I've seen with a lot of people is that even people that initially give up, it's a terrible term, right? Because you're not really giving anything up. We're just not taking what really doesn't belong to us in the first place, but just shows you how the indoctrination works. Like, I had to catch myself right there.
Yeah.
When you stop participating in that suffering and your system clears out, even if you tell yourself, I just don't want to do it because I know it's karmically bad for me, whatever, right? Then I've seen people actually, because the system starts clearing out and the perceptual lens starts clearing out, then they start actually feeling it. Then they start feeling the connection to the suffering. And then they really are able to sit back and say, wow. And there's such a sorrow about having taken part in something so senseless,
right?
Such senseless suffering, such senseless misery. And to hear the cries and screams of an animal. And by the way, there is no humane way to take a life that doesn't want to die. The animal doesn't want to die. So you are taking something, you're taking life. And again, I don't want to make this like a male female thing, but because so many more women are already kind of connected, or this resonates for them more as a man, as a protector of life. How can you really participate in this suffering and misquote the Bible out of context and use all these mental constructs and justifications to do something that you don't need to do anymore? Whether we ever needed to do it or not, it's really not a conversation I personally am interested in, because it doesn't matter. It's a hypothetical. We don't need to do it anymore. And we don't need to do it the way we're doing it. This does not need to be happening on the planet. And you're not the one benefiting. The people eating animals are not the ones benefiting. They're the ones suffering. The only people benefiting are the people, the owners. There's a reason they subsidize this stuff, right? It's partly to keep people stuck in their addiction, like with so many other things, right?
Yeah. It's just a lose-lose situation. Everyone loses. The planet loses, the animal loses, you're losing. So there's no win that comes out of any of that.
No. And you do suffer. We all, like I always I like to say to people, and I like to remind myself that everything in this world has a price, and we always pay it. Everything has a price, and we always pay it. The price may not come around for a minute. It may not hit you. The price may be something that hits you 10 years down the line, but it will come. And I don't say that because I think people should live from a place of fear, but I do think we should live within the laws of the universe and reciprocity and karma and truth. These are fundamental things that once we understand, we're like, wow, okay, let me adjust. Let me live a little differently. And you have so much more peace and happiness in your life because of it. And you're not feeding and allowing people that are literally profiting off your misery and your ill health. And actually, one other thing I just realized I haven't touched on yet, which is the connection between eating animals. And, you could speak to this better than I can, but the inflammation in the body and the fact that this inflammation in the gut and the brain are connected. And we know that inflammation in the brain is one of the leading causes of all kinds of mood disorders and mental health disorders and depression, anxiety, and mood dysregulation. That inflammation doesn't start in the brain, it starts in the gut, and it's a result of what you're eating. So this food mental health connection is massive. And it's one of the other things that the people in power don't want you to know, because if you knew, you would make better decisions and you would be healthy and they wouldn't profit off your misery anymore.
Yeah, no, the right foods have a very strong impact on your mood and your energy. The more energy you have, the better your mood is going to be. Real energy. I'm not talking about stimulant-based energy, energy you derive from food that's actually giving you high levels of nutrition. So that's all very much connected. There's no doubt about it.
And food that's alive. If you want to feel alive, you have to eat things that are alive. It's so basic, right? When you think about it that way, what's actually alive? So, clearly an animal who's been slaughtered and God knows where they've come from, where they're being shipped to, and what has to happen to that meat to even preserve it. And I don't even like using the word meat because it's so disconnected. And by the time it ends up in your house, and what you have to do to it to then have it be edible so that you don't get sick. It's not like we can eat the raw. With some people out there are on some crazy stuff, but for the most part, people season and cook. And what are we doing here? Like that, there's nothing in there that your body can use. Right. This is another lie, the lie that, nuts and fruits and grains and vegetables don't have protein, or that you can't get enough protein from other sources. It's a protein myth, right? There's nothing in that food from the fast food joint or whatever animal product is. There's nothing in there your body can use. And not only that, it's depleting you. It's taking the real raw energy. It's siphoning it, because that's just how that works. And same with dairy. It's this cause of inflammation, and it's mucus building, and it causes skin problems. There's so many things about it that don't serve us. And yet, it's milk from another species meant for the babies of that species. And somehow we've been indoctrinated to think that it's good for us. It's so absurd.
Yeah. No, it really is. I mean, you made a really good point about you don't want to feel like you're giving things up, depriving yourself. And I think sometimes people that look at plant-based nutrition look at it as a battle of attrition. Those are people with strong willpower. They actually want to eat meat, but they're resisting their urge. And sure, when I became a vegetarian when I was 15, and I still ate dairy for a while. I was vegan by the time I was 20. I'm 47 now. Now, initially, you do feel like you're giving up something, especially back then, because we didn't have the abundance of great nutrition information that we have now, especially for people that are active. So you're just figuring it out. So you're thinking, okay, how do I model this plant-based diet like a meat eater's diet to get what I think I need? Over time, you realize you don't have to. You're going to get what you need just with the variety of sources you choose from. So initially, you feel that there is something that you're giving up. Now, it doesn't have to be that way now, because the only thing that you're giving up are things that dissipate energy from you. So now you're going to be in a more abundant state. So you're actually buying into something that's going to feed you with way more nutrition than what you were getting previously. Yes. Now it's an upgrade. So I think it's important to look at it that way, not look at it as, okay, what am I going to replace this hamburger with? And then you start focusing on, and I think the fake meats and all that are good transition foods for sure.
That's exactly what I say. Yeah.
It allows people to take what they're comfortable with and find options here that are similar to that. And then over time, though, you're going to gravitate towards what I like to say real food, nuts, seeds, legumes, fruits, vegetables, because that's what's giving you the most impact. You really don't have to eat a whole lot of that to get what you need, because it's so nutrient dense that you're just feeding your body nutrition. I mean, I don't eat a ton for a guy my size and my activity level, but I don't need to eat a ton, because what I'm eating is primarily healthy foods that are giving me a lot of nutrition. So I'm getting a lot of bang for my buck with this. I'm getting energy without having to dissipate a lot of energy to get that, so that you're lighter on your feet and you're fueled, you're ready to go.
I love that so much. And I do think that that's, ultimately where we want to be. I just, I think there's two things I want to say about it. One is that initially, sometimes people don't feel so good when they give up eating certain things. But I just want to remind everyone that that's because your body's detoxing. It can feel not so good initially, but, and then the thing about the meat substitutes, which I do enjoy from time to time, but definitely less so than ever before. I will say that. I used to really live on them. But I think, we have to, some people will say, like, I had somebody message me the other day asking me about the environmental impact and it's like, well, we have to really take a step back and look at it. Like, let's stop the senseless murdering. Let's just stop the thing that's the worst of all the things, right? Is that innocent animals are having their throats slit. I hate to be so graphic, but this is actually what's happening. Senselessly having their bodies shredded, no painkillers, no anesthesia. This is torment of the most unconscionable kind happening, and we're paying for it. So let's stop that. Let's just make a commitment to stopping that. And then, yes, looking at the plethora of options that are available. And I think it's great, especially as a transition. I think it's really about just taking that next step, and not getting bogged down in. And I do think it's important to make sure you're getting enough of the healthy stuff, but that's important regardless of whether you're a quote meat eater or not. Like, you're not healthy just by virtue of eating meat or not eating meat. That's really not, because you may not be eating any of the things that you really need to be eating for true health. Right. But I do think it's a great transition. It's go a lot of grocery stores these days, especially in like bigger cities, there's literally sections called vegan, vegan or plant-based. Yep. They are like labeling this stuff. And there's so many options to throw into a stir fry or, throw on top of a salad with some avocado and just things that are hearty and tasty and will have you feeling full. You're not actually giving anything up by transitioning to this lifestyle, but like anything else, there might be a little bit of a learning curve. Like, take some time to learn. It's like, if we're doing anything new, we expect there to be a learning curve. But for some reason, when it comes to, when we ask people to stop, needlessly killing animals, people throw their hands up real quick. Like, well, I don't know what to eat. What do you eat? Well, it's like these is like really interesting conversations that we get to have. But I think where there is sincerity, some people aren't sincere. They just are asking questions for the sake of argument. But where there is sincerity, I'm always happy to have a conversation with people about what the next step could be for them. And when you are sincere about your desire to make a change, it's amazing the people and resources that will show up for you.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. Yeah, what you say, I mean, sometimes just putting you in a position or attempting to put you in a position where you have to explain yourself, that's a very common manipulation technique.
Yes, it is.
All those
Yeah.
people, I mean, I didn't come up with this phrase. It's in a book, Celestine Prophecy, The Interrogator, these 4 different personality traits. There's the intimidator. They try to intimidate with their physical presence. There's the interrogator, just barrage you with all these questions about things, just try to wear you out. And then there's the poor me, where they're always, oh, I got this problem. Oh, I got that problem. So
Oh my gosh, yeah.
full energy. So you see these kind of behaviors all the time. And sometimes it's fun just
All
to
the
call
time.
someone out on what they're doing. It's like, look, interrogator, I didn't come in here for an interrogation. And then they just stop because they realize, okay, that's what I'm doing. I'm being an interrogator. It's like, look, you're not going to intimidate me with this stuff. Like, okay, he just called me out on what I'm doing. So where do I go?
Like, shoot, let me look for another strategy real quick. Yeah. And when you're really grounded and connected, you can't, there's certain things that it's part of the thing is that we are so disconnected as a society. We aren't thinking with our hearts. The heart is also a brain. The heart has infinite intelligence, actually more than the brain, the thing we call the brain. We have numerous brains in the body, and the heart is a source of such profound intelligence that's actually connected to all creation. And it's from there that we actually get to manifest the life that we want, not just in terms of health or realizing that it isn't like this animal doesn't actually want their throat slit. Like, let me go ahead and not do that, but also in terms of relationship and in terms of money, in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of business. Without the heart connection, I think our success falls way shorter than where it does once we are tapped into the power of that part of ourselves.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, hey, this was great.
Yeah.
Don't keep you all day, so we can wrap it up right there.
Awesome.
So where can people find out more information about what you have going on?
So yeah, I'm on social media sites just under my name, Tara Daylami. My website is also just taradaylami.com. I've got 2 free newsletters that go out, a weekly and a daily. And I've got a free Telegram channel. If anyone wants the link to that, you can just hit me up on any of the social media platforms. And yeah, looking forward to connecting with people.
Perfect. Yeah, this was great. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It was awesome.
Sure. Let me hit stop recording.